Let's welcome our next speaker, Greg Brown.
If people have a vision or impression about you, you either confirm or deny that impression with every action you take and every decision you make during change. Max, a man I worked with many years ago, was about 6'6", big, tall, commanding presence, and when he walked into the room, people stood up and listened to him. He had the respect of a lot of people too. What was interesting about Max is he consistently confirmed the impression that people had about him. And that impression was not positive at all. But let's take a step back and add a different character into our conversation. This cool old guy is named Donald Hebb. And I'm very proud to say this cool old guy, Donald Hebb, is a Canadian neuropsychologist who's from Moncton, New Brunswick. Do we have any people from New Brunswick here in the Maritimes? Yay, you should be very proud. Because 80, the one person here. But be very proud, because he's really the founding father of the neuroscience movement. And back about 80 years ago, back in the 40s, he developed what he called Hebb's Law. And Hebb's Law states that neurons that fire together wire together. I didn't even know they knew what neurons were back in the 40s, but they did. Now neurons, and this is a little oversimplified, but neurons are those little electrical impulses that zoom around our brains, and they control our involuntary movements like our heart rate, our breathing, or our blinking, as well as our more voluntary actions like our arm movements, our behaviors, or the thoughts that we think. And what we know is that as these neurons fire together, they create what we call neural pathways, which are really the engines of change that goes on with each of us. So, how many of you learned how to type? Oh, a lot of you, good. How many of you handpeck? Thank you for being honest. Now, many years ago, I'm a little old, so many years ago, I learned how to type not on a keyboard, not on an electric typewriter, but on an old-fashioned typewriter that did not plug into the wall. Did any of you do that too? Yeah, thank you. So there's two people my age here. Now, do you remember doing this painful thing? A, S, D, F, J, K, oh, what's the next one? L, semicolon. Oh, do you remember doing that for like 2 weeks? You'd be like typing those stupid letters over and over. 2 weeks later, you would then go A, S, E, F, I got the E, J, I, L, semicolon. Do y'all remember doing that? Wasn't that hard? Now, I don't know about you, but I can type today almost as fast as I can think and talk. And I'm a fast talker for those of you that know me. And same with the henpeckers, they can type so fast. And the reason is that every time we do practice and every time we do something new like pressing those letters, we are getting our neurons to fire together. And as they fire together, those neural pathways are created that I can't even tell you where those letters are on the keyboard. And probably most of you can't either. So let's go back to Max. And let's think about how he created some new neural pathways and got his neurons firing together. So one of the things about Max was him and I were working on a program together, and he just kept getting stuck during change. And like all of us, we can say we're going to adapt to change, but when it comes, with the pedal to the metal, it's sometimes hard to make it work. And when we get stuck, it can become a problem, but can not only become a problem for us, it can become a problem for the organization. That's what was going on with my work with Max. So I could have asked Max a question such as, Max, why do you think you're stuck in the change? I could have asked him, a past type of question. I sort of had my ideas as to why I think he was, but I decided to take a more solution-focused approach. And the reason I didn't want to focus on the past is I believe that we can dwell in the past because we have spent all of our time there. If you think about it, up until this moment in time is all the past. We want to stay there because it's certain and we know it. But I decided to take a solution-focused approach and looked forward. And I asked Max this question. I said, Max, tell me about a situation that you handled change really well. And he responded to me and said, well, Greg, about a year ago, I converted to Buddhism. And I said, wow, that's a big change. I knew his history, and I knew that was a big stretch for him to be able to do that. The second question I asked him was this: Max, tell me how you actually did that. What were the skills, the abilities, the attributes that you used to get you through that change? And this is what he said to me. He said stuff like, well, Greg, I had a plan in place. I knew what I was going to do throughout that year. The second thing he said to me was, I had priorities. Every week I had a plan as to around what I was going to accomplish. I didn't have a huge list, but I knew what my top 3 priorities were. The third thing he said to me was, I knew who to call when I had questions, and I knew who to talk to if I didn't know the answers. And last but not least, the fourth thing he said to me was, I really tried to stay open to new ways of thinking, because I can get really stuck, like all of us can. I can get really stuck in my way of thinking. I need to stretch my thinking a little bit. The third thing I said to Max was this: Max, let's take those skills and abilities that you used in that situation that you handled really well and apply that to the area that you are stuck. Now, Max and I were working on a program together in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Max was an inmate there and was going to be incarcerated for his whole life. He had a dangerous offender designation, which means that you can be kept into jail right up until the day you die. And he should be kept up in jail just right until the day he died, because he did some very nasty things. And Max was in a program where we were teaching inmates how to care for other elderly and sick and infirm inmates, because just like in jail, there's an aging population. And it wasn't to get help, it was to teach them deeper skills, such as empathy and how to touch people in non-violent ways. And Max doesn't get a get out of jail free card by attending this program. He just wanted to make positive change in his little world because he knew he was going to be in jail his whole life. But he kept getting stuck. So the reason he kept getting stuck was that he had very deeply held white supremacist beliefs. Now, some of you might be like, well, he converted to Buddhism. Why didn't he accept everybody? Well, it's just like all of us who grew up in different religions or belief systems. How many people adhere to it? 100%. It's not that easy. But these beliefs were creating a problem. And because I knew him well at this point, I would joke with him and say, Max, you're really not a white supremacist. Let's be really clear. You're a Max supremacist, meaning you do not like anybody that's not like you. And this is this big 6'6" guy saying back to me, yeah, you're right, Greg. And I noticed throughout the program, though, he really wanted to shift his belief system because he'd been cultured in that since he was a kid. He just didn't grow up and decide to do this. He'd been cultured in this since he was a kid, but he wanted to change. So he took those skills and abilities that he'd learned while he was converting to Buddhism and he applied that to this belief system. And as I watched him throughout the program, I noticed that he started to change. And I knew that he had adapted to the change and accepted the change. When I turned around towards the end of the program, and I remember it like it was yesterday, this jolt went through me because I saw him kindly giving the gentlest foot massage to an elderly black prisoner. So I want y'all to stand up. I want to see if we can get some neurons firing together like Max did. So while you all probably don't need to deal with that sort of belief system to overcome here, let's talk about the 3 steps Max used to get unstuck and see if we can create some neural pathways and fire those together so that we can remember when we got unstuck. So I want you to put your right arm up if you feel comfortable doing that. And when you get stuck, I want you to first ask yourself this question. In what situation did I handle change well? Let's put our left arm up. Secondly, I want you to ask the question, what skills or abilities did I use in that situation that helped me handle the change? Next, what I want you to do, thirdly, is put these 2 together and apply those skills and abilities to the area that you might be stuck. If you do that, you will create those neural pathways because you get your neurons firing together. And one thing I know is this: if Max can use these 3 steps to create positive change on the planet, you can too. Thank you.